The reason that you feel these certain ways, the reason that you feel this way when you look in the mirror, the reason that you're insecure, the reason that you're depressed and negative might just be, first of all, the way that you observe other human beings in the world, the way that you judge other people. And so it's not that your thoughts influence your actions, it's that your actions influence your thoughts. And if you can go throughout the day seeing the bright side of life and not complaining when the traffic is crazy, or not complaining when the person in front of you is taking too long to check out, which happens all the time. I'm realizing that those are tests and it never happens to you. And I love this I love this topic. I'm like, whatever you believe in, like, this is the universe at work. Like, you don't get behind long lines because the universe isn't testing you, because you don't need to be tested, because you're patient.
Welcome to Something More Human. I'm Sam.
And I'm Elliot. We're a married couple exploring human connection and its impact on ours, our guests, and our listeners' lives.
Join us in creating something more human. Today in the studio / our living room / entire apartment, we have your favorite sultry voice, Mr. Elliot Archuleta.
Hello. Is that a sultry voice? What constitutes a sultry voice?
I don't know. I've always thought that you had an excellent voice and I wanted it through headphones into my ear, and here we are.
I wanted it in my ears and on my body.
You could honestly probably get paid to do ASMR.
Okay, let me tell that story really quick. We're already shooting, we're already rolling. So I used to work at this place called Cosmoprof, which was basically a professional beauty supply. And I would, spend hours every week calling all these different salons, to get their orders. And then I would drive and deliver the orders to Albuquerque and Gallup and Farmington. And one of the clients, I forget her name now.
It's probably best that you don't share it.
Yeah, you're right. She owned a salon in Gallup. And one time I called her and she told me that I had such a sexy voice. She's like 50 years old. She said that I had such a sexy voice that she could see me doing X-rated content.
She said that you should be a phone sex operator.
Yes. And then she said, and the next time you call me, maybe we can practice.
Oh my. Excuse me, ma'am.
But when I finally met her, she was very cool and like super sweet, and just, that's just kind of her way of messing around. And she was married, and she made it very clear that, she was just
joshing ya?
Yeah, she was really sweet, but it was I thought it was hilarious. I was not offended in the slightest.
Hopefully you were flattered.
Yeah, I was flattered. I could see it the other way around. Maybe someone might feel a certain way, but I was flattered. It's a good compliment.
Anyway, diving straight in. So, everybody, for context, Elliot and I are spending a lot of time on the podcast. There's a lot of cool things that we are cooking up, and that kind of means that we have lost a bit of touch with our relationship, like the friendship, the romance. And so we decided last weekend that we really needed to spend time not working and together and sort of reconnect.
Yeah.
So we decided, it was a beautiful, lovely day in Denver. So we decided to have a picnic, which I had been craving all week. We brought our picnic blanket. I made some sandwiches, some snacks.
Very American picnic.
It was adorable. So we go, and something we really love about it.
We have to tell them everything that was made. Sam made some really yummy vegan sandwiches, and then we had carrots and hummus, and we had potato chips, and we also had some chocolate. And what else did we have? What drinks did we bring?
I had a tea code drink, which, oh my gosh, if you're
lavender
listening,
peach
please.
Fizzy drink is really sick. What drink did I bring? Oh, I brought a liquid death, I believe. Anyway, absolutely sick setup to a beautiful park, Cheeseman Park in Denver.
And what's
hundreds of people
Yes.
out just on blankets, just chilling, reading books, vibing, eating. There's volleyball, there was hacky sack, there was kickball. It was just the quintessential spring day.
Yeah,
at the park.
Dogs playing, dogs relaxing, puppies, people reading books, people tanning, people playing. Just so lovely. A lovely day. It felt like we were on vacation, which is a feeling that I'm trying to figure out what are the elements that make it feel like we're on vacation. And I think when we initially moved, it was the unfamiliarity of places. But this felt a little bit more like the sun on my skin, the people having fun, the unstructured time. Like, we didn't really have anywhere to be. It was a Sunday. So we kind of just got to stay as long as we felt like it. We
also planned accordingly. Like, we said that we were going to do, like an unplugged time together. And I feel like, that part mattered quite a bit.
Yeah, it wasn't just like no work talk, but it was also no phone.
Right.
And I think something I want to point out is that when we had first kind of settled in, we both had our phones face down on the blanket, eventually took them and put them into the side pocket of our picnic basket.
Yeah.
So they were fully out of sight. And I think for me, there was a huge, I don't know, like subconscious shift between, even if my phone's face down,
right,
and I'm not looking at it, and obviously it's face down so I can't see notifications, it's still in front of me.
Well, you've heard that, or you've heard about that like study they did basically about this exact thing, which is like the gist of it was that people were inherently distracted and, you know, less able to focus on a task at hand if their phone was even, you know, face down, but in their periphery, like significant difference. So even though this part seems minuscule, I think that was actually a really good thing that you did, was putting the phones completely away. It makes a difference.
I mean, I had never like embodied the results of the study that you're talking about. I never really felt like I was distracted at dinner if my phone was on the table. And I kind of always put my phone on the table so that it's not susceptible to getting lost or stolen or dropped or whatever. Something about putting it all the way away and out of sight and out of mind really allowed my mind to just open up and be fully, like, there were things that I wanted to talk to you about,
right,
about the podcast, about people who've reached out to us, about things that we have to do this week, about my plans, about ideas that I had. Like, there were updates that I had to share with you. By putting my phone away from my vision, I could really be fully present. And maybe that's also what made it feel like vacation, is presence of mind.
Yeah. One thing I didn't mention that I snuck into the lunchbox when Sam wasn't looking, when we were preparing, is a conversation card game that we have. And I was thinking, sometimes when you're with your significant other, I mean, I don't know, not that we feel like we know them front and back, but sometimes you're not sure what to say. And I wasn't worried that I wasn't going to be sure what to say, but I thought that it would be a good idea because there's probably going to be some questions in this card game that we've never even asked each other. And we've been talking a lot about the power of language, especially the power of a question, and how good it feels to be asked a question, especially from a loved one, something that they may have never asked you. I especially think about this when I'm thinking about like my parents. I keep seeing these videos like on TikTok and Instagram. It's like, you know, before your parents pass away, like ask them these 10 questions or whatever. And it's like, that's powerful. So I did that. And I think that you were glad I brought it. And I think that was part of I in my opinion, I think those questions were part of the reason why we had such a great moment.
Yeah, I think that we've emphasized before the power of investing in the friendship piece of your relationship. And I think oftentimes these types of question games can be hyper-specific on romance. Like, what about me did you fall in love with first? Or tell me when you first knew that you loved me. Or like, what's something that I can do better as your wife? All are great questions. And there's something special about asking questions and having conversation about maybe ways that I don't know that you think, or like ways that you've experienced life that I don't know about. And that is, I think, a lot bigger than our relationship itself.
Well, there's also a little bit of added pressure when the questions, I feel like there's more freedom to answer these questions that we're talking about versus there's less quote unquote freedom. And in my opinion, there might be more pressure to answer a question that's about our romance. You know what I mean?
Sure. Like you want to answer it the right way, or like, let me think really hard about when we first started dating.
Yeah. The intimate part of our relationship, there's more, what was the word I was just looking for? That I found, there's more pressure there, but there's more fun with the friendship aspect of our relationship, right? I feel like you have you feel like you have to perform with these certain questions, like, oh my gosh, if I answer this wrong, she might feel upset about our intimate, you know, the intimate part of our relationship. Versus friendship, there's just so much more nuance and there's so much more freedom to answer the question very freely, you know, when you see it from that perspective.
I think what I'm hearing you say is that the framing of the questions are totally open-ended versus the question kind of being about me.
Right, exactly.
Which you can do with a friendship, right? Like, when we first met, what was your first impression of me? Or things like that. But there's so much to be learned from questions that are fully open-ended. Yeah, period, full stop.
I agree.
I think something else before we kind of go more on asking each other questions and the power of giving someone the space to answer these types of questions is even us, and I think that this is a common sentiment, is when you're feeling disconnected from your partner or your friends, the idea around spending quality time together or investing the time to reconnect can often feel like, oh, well, I have to go spend money to do this, or money will have to be involved in order for us to reconnect. And so if I'm in a season of saving, if I'm trying to be more frugal, if money is an obstacle for a lot of people. Yeah. It's not like you can go out to have a fancy dinner every single night. And even for us, sometimes we're like, oh, we'd love to go get dinner, but we already ate. Like, we have food at home. This was a food that we made from our house. Mm-hmm. A picnic is free. And you don't even have to buy a card game. Like, in the age of AI, just ask AI, Google 100 questions to ask your friend, spend some time thinking about it throughout the week. Like, there's actually a way to do this totally free. And I truthfully can't remember the last time we were this present with one another.
Yeah, it was definitely a very, very visceral feeling. And it's funny that you said, even though I was on edibles, which heightened my experience, you were not, obviously, because you don't do that. Mm-hmm. But you said you felt like you were on drugs.
Yeah,
which I don't think was really, you weren't really being dramatic about that.
No, I was having such a good time. I felt like I was on drugs, literally. Yeah. Because I think that, I don't know, you tell me, something that really appeals to the act of being high or doing drugs is that your inhibitions are sort of taken away, which to me means the thinking about the past, the thinking about the future, and an ability to just be fully present in the moment, and sort of how much brain space is freed up to do that. I felt so present with you that I felt like I was on drugs. So those feel very kind of tightly woven together.
Yeah, I'd say I mostly agree. I think that I just do edibles because it gives me, it's kind of even hard to explain. I always say that it sparks my creativity, but especially in a moment like this where creativity really wasn't involved, I kept writing things down. Do you remember that? Obviously. Mm-hmm. But that right there brings me joy. I want to remember this because it was so beautiful. I'm going to write this down just so I can reminisce on it later. And there were some ideas that came too, and that's just my brain always, that I'm sort of in this idea mode, taking ideas, thinking of ideas for the podcast or just my own life. But yeah, I think the inhibition part is true because you had a phone call with your mom, mm-hmm. and that was, a pretty normal conversation. And then it sort of provided me an opportunity to, tell your mom that I was there as well, and that I, whatever, missed her, loved her, appreciated her. And then obviously the emotional moment happened. And mm-hmm. that connection hasn't happened between me and your mom maybe ever. Not that that's a bad thing, but, I got teary-eyed and it sounded like your mom was a little choked up too. But I think the edibles had something to do with that. And so
tell the people why I did it.
Oh, I just said you were listening and giving your mom a lot of feedback and advice on a very sort of important thing that she's doing right now in her life, which mm-hmm. revolves around, the property that she has. And in that moment, had I not been on weed, I don't know if, it's funny that I'm doing this, but no one's going to see these. I'm trying to figure out a better way to say on weed. If I had not been under the influence of edibles, I probably wouldn't have done it. But I realized that you were just being so caring. And I was like, hey, Trish, love you. Just letting you know I'm here listening, so I don't think I'm, there's someone else here or whatever, I'm eavesdropping. I really love your daughter, and I can tell that, she really cares about you and loves you. And if it weren't for her, I might not be here. And that, I could tell that kind of choked her up a little bit.
And also you were choked up.
Oh, definitely. And I think that's the power of weed for me, because that probably wouldn't have happened had I not done it. And that's kind of why I did it, because I wanted to be a little more vulnerable and emotional than I already am. And so I guess all that to say, was it completely free? No. Did we spend money on the groceries and the things? Yes. Did I do a little bit of weed? Did that cost money? Yes. But overall, of course, it was a free event because it was at the park. I think even small things, telling the audience, it's so funny that we're talking about this, but small things the weather right now in Denver is so volatile. So what we did is we planned ahead. We looked at the week ahead and we said, this day is the nicest day. It's 67 degrees. This is the day for us. We're putting in our calendar, and we are not flexing. We are not going to relinquish this time for us. We're not rescheduling. And we planned ahead, and it ended up just really being a memorable moment together.
Yeah, I also think I'm learning that this is not the case for everyone, actually. But I'm such a desert turtle. Obviously, we were raised in Albuquerque. It is the desert. I get so much energy from the sun on my face. Mm-hmm. And so the way that felt also kind of contributed to it feels like we're on vacation. I feel like I'm on drugs. I'm so in the moment. I'm having such a great time. Mm-hmm. I will say this as a blanket statement with the caveat that not everybody has this experience. But as we're kind of in this weird time of year where like some days are cool and some days are warm, like spring is in the air, but winter is kind of like around.
Yeah, it's going to snow in like 5 days.
If you can, use those opportunities to like actually go outside, actually touch grass, actually get like sunlight in your eyeballs.
For sure.
It seems so trivial and so small, but it really just made my whole 2024 so far. Like it was the best day ever.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to talk about the questions that we pulled. Yeah, I can't get over. I really can't get over how, I don't know what's happened in the last month of my life, but like how important and how powerful like just words and language really are. And this is not something that I probably would have ever asked you, because it's just not a question that you really think about often, you know? And this is a question I've heard before, so it's not inherently super unique. There are other questions in the deck that are more unique than this one, but basically this question asks, what would you title this chapter of your life? In my Weed Brain Influence, my title was super long. I wrote it down on some paper, and I think I have it written down here. Not the first part. Oh, I do have it. It's in my notebook. I had to transcribe it before I threw away the paper. And for those of you that, those millennials of you that listen to Fall Out Boy and Chiodos, even like The Devil Wears Prada, Drop Dead Gorgeous back in the day. I don't know if you remember those super long song titles, but this is what it reminded me of because it's a really long title.
And also your way of telling me that when you first read this to me, I said, that's a paragraph. That's not a title.
And I was like, this is a title. Every word is capitalized, so it's a title.
Okay.
The chapter of my life was called The Latest Download from Whoever Made the Universe, : Your actions create the movie that is your life. Is it a sad movie? Does it have a happy ending? And I think that you pulled it and you asked me first and I answered, and then I asked you and you answered. Do you want to talk? Do we want to explain a little bit about our titles, or I kind of do, just because this is going back to the weed thing again. I had this like epiphany. So for the last couple months, I've really been struggling here in Denver, feeling really lonely, and I realized that this is actually, since we haven't been back to Albuquerque since Christmas, this is the longest that I've ever been away from home, from all my friends and family. So that's kind of what's going on. I think I've felt really lonely despite making friends here. Just, I'm feeling homesick for sure. I've also, for most of my life, I've struggled with, I wouldn't even say depression. I want to be more harsh on myself and say like negativity and having a tendency to bring the vibe down, complaining behind the wheel and complaining when I get behind someone in the grocery store line who's taking too long. And what I realize is like, what I normally hear is that your thoughts influence your actions. But for me, I realized that, Elliot, the reason that you feel these certain ways, the reason that you feel this way when you look in the mirror, the reason that you're insecure, the reason that you're depressed and negative might just be, first of all, the way that you observe other human beings in the world, the way that you judge other people. And so it's not that your thoughts influence your actions, it's that your actions influence your thoughts. And if you can go throughout the day seeing the bright side of life and not complaining when the traffic is crazy, or not complaining when the person in front of you is taking too long to check out, which happens all the time. I'm realizing that those are tests and it never happens to you. And I love this I love this topic. I'm like, whatever you believe in, like this is the universe at work. Like you don't get behind long lines because the universe isn't testing you, because you don't need to be tested, because you're patient. But I always get in those lines all the time. And I'm almost always pissed off. And it's like, dude, you're being tested and you're still getting behind these long lines because you haven't passed the test.
I think what's also interesting, though, is I would be so curious if we, like, I don't know, for a month, went to the store equal amounts of time with a stopwatch, or somehow quantified how much time we spend in lines.
You think it's the same?
I would think that they're comparable.
Yeah, it's perception for sure, too, right? Perspective. Anyway, I realize that I think people think they're like, no, it's not that easy. Like, my life's not going to change if I go throughout my day and I don't respond negatively to this particular situation. Absolutely, yes, it will. And then that day and the next day I proceeded to have all these things that happened that were like, in my opinion, they were tests. Like, how are you going to respond to this? And the more positively you respond, those create feelings and thoughts, and those thoughts are reinforced, and those thoughts reinforce your further actions. And if those are both positive, it's a positive cycle and your life will change. Absolutely. And I realized that at the park, and I'm going to get super vulnerable. It's something I didn't tell you. I was like taking a selfie of us, but I was doing it to look at myself to make sure that I liked the way that I looked. And I didn't. And I felt some really bad thoughts about the way that I look. And I realized that was why, because I'm probably too judgmental of the world and of myself. And if I can change those things, then I'll probably change the way that I see myself.
Sure.
Right. And thanks to the sativa guava edible, because it probably wouldn't have happened.
That you thought was watermelon.
Yes. So all those things happened pretty quickly in my brain. And then I asked you, and I loved your your response, which is hilarious because it shows the difference between you and I. Your chapter title was very short.
Well, yeah, I had two that came to mind.
Yeah.
So my word for the year, my word for 2024 is blossom. In a previous episode, I'll link it in the description, we talked about sort of this, you called it a feminine awakening, which is like a realization that I had that I have cultivated and nurtured this more sort of masculine, go-getter, analytical type A side of myself. And I can actually nurture the other side of myself, which is a little bit more intuitive, emotional, feminine. I can be both of those things at the same time.
Absolutely.
I don't have to pick one. And so thinking about my word for the year, I was thinking soft, and then I was like, well, that's not quite as like achievement oriented as I was hoping. But I didn't want to do something like one of my friends, her word for the year is leap. I didn't want to do something like that, which felt a little bit more explicitly achievement oriented. So I chose blossom because it felt like a flower, delicate, beautiful, takes its time, and has elements of like growth, transformation, depth, breadth. And those are all like this dichotomy at play. Like those two things can exist and do exist at the same time.
Right.
Okay, so that was one. The second one was the Zen cone, leap and the net will appear, which is something that's been on my mind lately, especially as we consider the podcast. Like this is something we've never done before. We have goals that we're terrified of, which is a really exciting place to be. We're dreaming bigger than we ever have. And like, yeah, there's a lot of uncertainty and unknown, and it's really exciting. So this idea of like continue to go after it, leap and the net will appear, and to not play it safe. So those were the two titles of this chapter that I came up with.
Yeah. And that's powerful that we got to speak about that, and it all came from a card game. And I'm not saying that our conversation at the park wouldn't have been as fruitful or not as good, but it happened the way that it did, and I'm grateful that it did. And I just think that there's so much potential when it comes to questions like this, especially if you do feel that way. You're like, oh, I'm not sure. What are we going to talk about if we don't have our phones? And it's like, this is an easy out. Like just, like you said, find some questions on the internet, or like find a card game, make it fun. And there's going to be some questions that you have the opportunity to answer yourself that provide power and clarity for your own life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The action, which is the words, create clarity.
I think what you just said is really profound, that action creates clarity, which is in direct alignment with this idea that you're talking about, which is actions affect thoughts. And it seems like this is all backwards, right? Like you want to have clarity before you take action, or you want to transform your thoughts before you start taking action. But actually, when you work backwards and you do it backwards, I mean, this is a theme that comes up in business too. Like action creates clarity, successful people fail fast. And so what is your definition of success or clarity or failure? Or
also art? Like we went to Jai's opening this past weekend, and she said something almost the exact same thing, which I've heard a lot of artists say, which is like, we were talking about titles, and she was basically saying that you don't have almost any idea. You think you know what this means. You think that you know what this thing that you're making means, and then you make it, and then the clarity comes around, right? And I've heard that in so many instances for photographers or sculptors, painters,
same thing
graphic
in dance.
designers. Yeah, sure, dancing too, right? Like just do the thing, and then from that thing that you do, the clarity will come about. And it seems like that sort of applies in very many ways, art and business and just life in general.
Yeah, a metaphor comes to mind, which is like a ball of yarn that is tangled. You could look at how every thread is tangled against all the other threads and think about how it might untangle, but you can only go so deep with that. The only way to untangle this ball
is to set it on fire.
No. Is to start, right? Like one piece at a time will reveal the next step or the next tangle to be undone.
For sure.
That's so you. Just set it on fire.
Yeah. Unless you really need the yarn, then
you know what I mean.
Use your hands.
Like necklace, whatever.
I like it.
Something else that inspired me from what you were saying is we were kind of framing this conversation around the power you give someone else when you ask them one of these kinds of questions, or you open the floor to discuss in this way. But I think something else that's really powerful is the power that you give yourself to think about the answer to questions you may not have otherwise thought about.
It's profound. Like, I think a question literally, like, that's why knowledge is, like, reading is knowledge, and like, words are knowledge. Like, even asking a question and not having the answer is knowledge. Truly, I really feel that way. Asking, what we're going to do in this next part is ask each other a question that we picked out, right?
And we want you to steal these questions.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know what you're about to ask me, but I guess I'm asking you now, like, when you pick the question, was it a question that you've ever read before? Something like it, anything like it?
Okay, so this is what's interesting about our different strategies for this question. So you pulled a card out of our card game deck. I did a little research around like types of questions. I was falling down the rabbit hole of questions about me, like when did you know you fell in love with me? What about me do you love so much? Like that kind of rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Which gave me clarity around the kind of question I didn't want to ask. So I created this question, and then I saw online, I have a follow-up question for you.
Oh.
I think that this comes from the same card game deck, the follow-up question.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Why don't we just get into it?
Okay. What is the most recent thing you've learned about yourself?
Ooh. That I have the power to create my own reality. I mean, it's that simple, really, truly. You know, and it's just based off of the things we're talking about now, which is like, you are in control of how you respond to everything in your life. And sometimes you get so wrapped up in, no, that's not true. Like, this is my automated response. And that actually is partially true, right? I've been wired to be this negative person for so long of my life. Why? I don't know. It doesn't really matter. There's no excuse. So it's just who I am. And that's not the way that it works, not the way that it has to work. Right? So like, I think that would be the simplest answer instead of me rambling on like I normally do. Yeah, that I have the power to create my own reality. No matter the circumstances, no matter what happens to me and my family and you and our finances and my friends and this apartment, like, you still have the power to create your own reality no matter what.
Would you say that this is also a freedom from the framework or the phrase, this is just who I am?
I mean, I feel like I mostly hear that in older folks. And I just refuse to be that way as I get older. I really hope that we are always learning and always changing. But yes, I would say yes. I mean, I feel like this, sure, maybe I hear that in people my age, but I think it's just an excuse to stay where you are because people are afraid to change, you know, because it's unknown. And you're more comfortable, even if you're miserable, like, you're comfortable in misery because it's comfortable, you know it. But to answer your question, yes.
That also reminds me, my word of the year is blossom. When I shared that with my therapist, she reminded me of a French-American poet who wrote, and the day will come that the risk to remain the same outweighs the risk to blossom. Or maybe it's the fear of remaining the same outweighs, something like that. Yeah,
that sounds more right. I feel like you've said this before. Yeah, but I get what you're saying. I love it. But I'm going to ask you the same question. It's a powerful question. Like, everybody listening, just answer the question. It's so beautiful. It's like, it's just a string of words put together that like literally creates this universe in your head that you're like, yeah, how do I feel about that? Like, let me like marinate on that for a little bit. Let me take out a pen and paper and answer that question. And I guarantee you, however you answer it, it will create some clarity for you. Whether or not what you choose to decide with that clarity and that newfound knowledge, that's up to you. The question, you're a horse and the question brings you to the water, but you have to be the one to drink it, you know?
Oh, wow. Okay. I think there are a few things that I've learned. I mean, I feel like I've learned more about myself in the last year than in my entire life. One of them is what we've already been talking about, which is that I can be both type A and organized and a go-getter and resilient and strong and steadfast and all of these sort of more traditionally masculine traits, and soft and emotional and empathetic and understanding and intuitive, and like those things can be true at the same time, and I can cultivate them simultaneously. So that's something like continuously on my mind. And then another one is sort of around breaking free of the paradigm of like capitalism and quarters, breaking up the year in quarters. I'm just noticing, like, if I think about the seasons, I have kind of a winter personality and a summer personality. And I don't mean like I have seasonal depression. I mean, like, in the winter time, I tend more towards like the hermit. I want to be inside. I want to do more introspection. I want to be alone more. I want to grind my ass off, eat, sleep, wake up, do it again. And in the summer, I want to quote, fuck off in the flowers, which someone asked us recently, like, what is our dream state? What's our dream day? And I was saying I have a winter version and a summer version. So the summer version is really like kind of minimal work where possible, getting outside, hanging out with people, doing things, trying things. Like the energy that I have is totally different, and the desire that I have to be social is totally different. And instead of being like, oh, I should go out and do this and do that, especially being in a new city, right? Like in January, oh, I should do more meetups, hang out with more people, go to more networking events, but I don't want to. I want to really focus on work and being okay with that and accepting that, because I know that come true spring, I'll be ready to go. I'm already kind of feeling it in like the March, April timeframe. I have a follow-up question.
Oh, I thought that your second question was the follow-up question. Okay, after I answered it, but no, go ahead.
Here's the follow-up question. Who are you in the process of becoming?
I have no idea. I mean, I do, but I don't know. It's questions like that, it feels like you have to mull over for a while. I think freely myself, because I feel like there's so many things I want to do creatively that I can't do because I'm in this box that is a wedding photographer. And once you place those labels on yourself, you feel a certain pressure to perform within, a set of confined standards, right? But there's so much more to me, and I feel stifled all the time. And there's so many things so many ideas that I have that I want to pursue. So many things I have that I want to share with people that I don't really quite know how to. And so I think I'm in the process of trying to find out how to do that. And I think the way to do that is to open myself up and give myself permission to be exactly who it is I want to be on the internet, right? Because I think I'm who I want to be, like in front of you and in front of other people. But I want to be this creator. I want to be this speaker, this writer on the internet, where, kind of where I make a living, so to speak, doing those things, and not even financially, but like.
Do you mean in terms of like notoriety?
Notoriety, sure, but just like the opportunity to express myself will have to be done. Of course, it could be done not on the internet, but I want it to be done on the internet, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, so I guess if it was like another chapter I was going to title, it would be, to freely be me. And I just haven't got there yet, but that's what I'm on the path to doing. And I think that the podcast is helping with that, because a lot of it has to do with, I think, speech and language. I'm not the best at that, or I don't think I am. And I think this podcast is helping me do that, which is really cool.
Well, something I asked you recently was like, you often say out loud, I'm not good at speaking, or Sam, why don't you do the talking? Because I'll mess up my words, or I'm not good, or sort of with your words reaffirming this kind of negative attribute about yourself.
Yeah.
And then I asked you, well, I mean, technically, podcasting is speaking. Did you ever see yourself basically being a speaker for a living? Well,
isn't it funny that, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn, I almost never am, but like so many times in my life I've heard like, oh, you have a great like radio voice. Like you would be great at that. And I've heard that at least 5 or 6 times. And now here we are speaking for, well, not a living, but we're speaking for,
we're doing our best.
our main source of creative outflow. So yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay. Are
you going to ask me this question back?
Oh, the follow-up question.
I haven't thought about it, so I'm okay to move on.
Repeat the question and then answer it. Yeah.
Who are you in the process of becoming?
Yeah. So who are you in the process of becoming? I'm trying to think of it before you answer, just because that's like what I like to do. It's like a game always. Like, what does she gotta say?
Yeah.
Let me think about it.
I kind of don't know, so we'll see what you say.
Oh, well, I don't have anything right at this very moment.
I think that what first pops into my head when I think about this question is the idea, which is true for business and love, that you have to first become the person that the future version of your business, your relationship, whatever needs. And so doing the work to become the business owner, the partner, the wife, the friend that is required of my future life and like the life that I'm dreaming up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that does require a bit of this twofold thing that we're talking about, like masculine and feminine, cultivating both sides. yeah, who exactly is that person? I think something that I'm trying to put into practice right now is, you're doing it actually also, we're kind of on the same wavelength, which is, instead of saying, oh, I'm thinking about Elliot, I should reach out to him, and then getting distracted and not, and then 3 days later Elliot reaches out, right? Like, just doing it in the moment. And kind of what's crazy about that is, well, that feels like leaning into the intuitive side of myself, because I feel like when you're thinking about someone, they might be thinking about you, or they will be thinking about you, or they might need you, or just, something that's in the air. Something also recently happened, where I didn't do this. Meredith, the person that we met at this networking event that we went to, I was emailing her. She asked me for a thought, and I was sharing her some ideas that I had just from our experience, which was a little bit more technical. I thought, as I was writing the email, you should, have you considered creating a directory or even an app or something to connect people? This woman's really pioneering networking groups. But I didn't say that. I just left it out, and I focused on the technical thing we were talking about. Literally the next week, she sends an email out to her list, which we are subscribed to. And it says, thank you so much. Soon, I will be releasing a directory. So yeah, just acting on the thoughts instead of repressing them. If you're thinking of someone or you have an idea, just share it and just reach out. And I think that is a trait of the future version of myself who is seeing and being seen by a lot of people.
That's the one thing I'm so bad at doing, which is you have the idea, sure, is life chaotic? Are there so many other things to be doing besides exercising your creative mind? Yes. But in my instance, I have some time to do that. So it's you have the idea, find a way to share it. Find the least path to resistance and share it. And that has happened to me 10,000 times. And now the idea is just in ether and it's gone and it's not as powerful anymore. And someone else has probably used it. And when you think about it, act on it, Yeah, and something I'm usually really bad at is reaching out to people when I have the thought to, but I used to be bad at that. But I think coming to Denver, I've realized how important it really is to do. And so I feel like I've been doing a really good job at reaching out to friends and family and people here in Denver that we've met, especially trying to really strengthen those connections. So yeah, I really like that topic.
I'll just add a tangible tip in there that texting can often feel like a lot. And if you want to reach out to someone, but you don't feel like you have the time to type all the things, just send them a voice memo. And voice memos, voice memos feel a little bit more personal, obviously, because you're listening to their voice, the intonations, tone really gets lost over text.
We could spend a whole episode on this, but I really, really am grateful to Aaron and Mel, who I think spearheaded that for me, because that's the only way that I talk to them now is through voice memos. And now even Cody he reached out to me today on voice memo. And when I first started reaching out to him via DM on voice memo, he was like, oh, this is interesting. This is kind of strange. Why are you? And I told him why. And it's more personal to hear someone's voice, and it's also quicker.
This is interesting because,
yeah, go ahead.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
This is interesting because I would be curious. Mel and Aaron, you'll have to tell us. I would be curious if they have spearheaded it for you because I was voice memoing them.
Interesting, because you never voice memo me.
Well, I voice memo a lot, in the corporate world to get things out fast.
Are Aaron and Mel your corporate girlies or what?
No, but I got in the habit of voice memoing.
Yeah.
From that.
I love it. I think more people should do it. It saves time and
it's more personal.
Yeah, and you want to hear someone's voice, and also it saves some confusion, because texting can be absolutely awful. You're actually assuming quite a bit when you're reading someone's text.
Yeah.
Let's wrap this up with this last question. Do you think the image you have of yourself matches the image people see you as?
Ooh. My first instinct is to say yes, but I'll tell a story about last weekend that is kind of what makes me think otherwise. We went to this networking event that I talked about earlier, and the structure was a little bit different than any networking event we had been to before. It was a little bit more structured. There was a little more facilitation happening, and the facilitator continuously throughout the night was taking moments to invite attendees up on stage to share either a reflection from the question that she posed or insight or whatever, you know, sharing something in response to a prompt. And right from the moment we got there, Elliot was like, Sam, you should go get up there. You should definitely get on the stage. And I was like, well, I don't know. Maybe. If I feel called later, I'll do it, but not at this very moment.
And the Lord spoke to you.
Well, so later, I was just getting in my head, like, I'm very uncomfortable, and this is a really good opportunity to let more people in Denver know, like, we're here. Here's what we're doing. If it resonates with you, like, we would love to connect, because I can't possibly speak to all 75 people who are here. So towards the end, I did get up on stage. I did share a little bit. And our friend Ramon, who was with us, had the 2 cents like in his mind to just whip out his phone and snap a video. And when I finished speaking, I sort of was in my head a bit like, was that coherent? There were definitely more people than I thought were there, you know, when you're on stage looking at them. I felt like my voice was quivering a little bit because I was nervous. Did I get my point across? There were other ideas I had that didn't quite come out. Like, I probably did fine, maybe not as great as I hoped. And then when I listened to the video back, I was like, oh, yeah, like this is actually pretty good. And I
sounded great.
Yeah, I just had a moment of pride. So I think naturally, right, there's a disconnect between the way the world perceives you and the way you perceive yourself, because you're always your own worst critic, because you know in your mind how things were supposed to go. Mm-hmm. And when people lack that context, which is everyone outside of your brain, then it's almost like releasing expectations for something, right? Like, you're going to have a better time if you don't have expectations. So I'm medium. Like, if I had to rate it, and 10 was, yeah, they're the same, I'm giving myself like 6.5, 7.
It's a hard question, you're right, because I think everyone perceives everyone differently. But I guess overall, I would say no. And I wonder if the people who say yes are less critical of themselves. Because I would say that no, at this moment, no, because I think I perceive myself so often in such a negative light. And I'm working on it. I'm getting better. So I immediately think that people think about me the way I think about myself, which I know is not true. And this is something I'm really working on, is in something that we talk about pretty often, especially on the podcast, like, you know, getting whatever these negative reviews, whatever, it's not a big deal, but like, not everyone's going to like you, and not everyone should. The same with the business model. Like, if your business model is for everyone, then it's for nobody, which, I don't know. I mean, McDonald's is almost for everybody, and they're doing pretty well. So,
well,
almost not for everybody. But
I do resonate with the sentiment. Like, if you try and speak to everyone, you'll speak to no one.
And I do resonate with a spicy chicken sandwich. Oh my God. No mayo, lettuce only.
And no tomato. Does it normally come with tomato?
It does not. Oh, man, it's just, But, yeah, I hope that people see me, you know, whatever, as caring and funny, always wanting to make sure that people feel comfortable. That's like how I want to be perceived. But at the end of the day, I can't control that. I can do my best, do my actions, and think the things I say, but it's not up to me how people feel about me. And so I have to sort of learn to let that go, which I'm getting better at.
I think that's really profound what you just said, which is it's not up to you. And I would go as far as to say it's kind of none of your business how other people feel about you.
Yeah, it's true. It really is none of my business. I mean, and it can't be. I don't know what's going on in your head. I'll never know. Even if someone tells me how they feel about me, they might feel a little bit differently in their head. So yeah, it's a good question, but I think it's not one that you should really concern yourself with, unless, I think, well, like I said, the power of a question, what this question just did for me, what I realized, which I love about our relationship, is like, we're so opposite. So it's usually a completely opposite answer. And you were like, yeah, I think for the most part. And I was like, you probably feel that way because, like, you give yourself the benefit of the doubt, and like, you think of yourself as generally a decent person, right? You don't look at yourself so negatively. And so, like, that question just did that for me. And that's the power of a question. Ask more questions. Ask yourself more questions. Ask your partner more questions. Ask your friend more questions. I hope that you ask us more questions.
Which you can do. You can submit questions and topic requests anytime. There's always a form in the description to do that. And we read all of it. So, and
we've talked, the last episode was all about, we didn't necessarily structure an entire episode around the one question that somebody asked, but we definitely kept it in mind, and we did answer that question. I hope at least we addressed the question that somebody asked recently, which I hope that you watched it, and I hope you're listening. We don't know who you are because it's always anonymous, which is also an incentive to to partake.
Episode 10 with Christina was our most requested topic. So we do read them and we do listen and we do our best to answer.
And we do love you, every single one of you. And this is the end of this episode.
No, I have themes.
Oh, it's not. Oh, no,
Sorry.
themes.
Yeah, I want to pull out some themes.
I'm getting hot.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, let's wrap it up. Okay. So themes and tips that I'm pulling out of this conversation. That's funny that you said you're getting hot because I have a bullet point that says sun on your face. Not you specifically, but the idea that if you're feeling down or if you're feeling like you want to try something new or you're feeling like you want to do a free thing to reconnect with someone, go touch some grass, get some sun on your face and see how that makes you feel. Because for me, it's always significantly more impactful than I chalk it up to be in my head. Another one that I have is in a similar vein, which is plan reconnection. And I hope that this episode is a reminder that you can do it for little to no cost, and don't let money be a barrier to spending quality time and reconnecting with people you love or people that you want to be in your life. I also have energy is not created or destroyed, so it's transferred, right? So when you're talking about feeling negative and putting negative energy out there, you're kind of getting it back often. And when you're generating that positive energy, or you're saying, okay, I'm pissed off because the person in front of me is driving really slow, instead of complaining and putting that negative energy out there, I'm deciding to transform it and think about this as a test and think about becoming a better version of myself. You're putting that positive energy out.
Yeah.
And it seems like when you do that, you do get more positive energy back. You are generally a little bit happier. You generally see good things that happen.
Especially if you're with somebody. Because I think that the thing that I'm learning about life with you is that the way I see the world, if it's bad, like I corrupt your view of the world. And if I'm responding to all these things negatively with you in the car, with you by my side, that energy, like you said, it's not destroyed, it's transferred. And that's something that I think about a lot, and is why I'm especially trying so hard for me, of course, but also for you, like, and for the audience, like for the people around you, like you're, that negative energy. And I'm not saying sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you're just having a bad day. I totally understand that. But for the most part, think about the people that are around you. Like that energy gets onto them and into them and goes through them, and and they probably are impacted by it in many more ways than you realize. So it's a good point that you bring up.
And I just want to remind everyone that we're not saying we have all the answers, because obviously we're like just doing our best.
Yeah.
And a lot of this is just practice, like practice and fail and then practice again. And by getting into the habit of practicing these habits, you will see transformation. I have just share or just reach out, like when you think of that person or when you have an idea. Something I think that I've learned in the last year around making connections is, yes, to ask people questions, but also you will be memorable to people if you can offer them something. So if I meet you and I'm like, oh, Elliot, you would really love so-and-so. Do you follow them on Instagram? Have you heard their podcast? And because I'm the person that introduced you to this thing you may like, you'll remember me. And so it's not from like a self-serving angle of I want this person to remember me, but if you can be of service more actively for people, you will also be making more meaningful connections naturally. And then the last one I have is give yourself power. So giving yourself the power to reflect and answer questions that you may not have asked yourself, or to open space to reflect that you may not have otherwise without listening to this episode or without the prompt. But you can actually give yourself that power, and you don't need external permission. You can grant it to yourself.
Sam and I want to thank you so much for listening to Something More Human. If you're enjoying the podcast and want to support us, there are plenty of no-cost, minimal effort ways you can do so.
For starters, you can subscribe to the show on your favorite listening platform. You can leave us a 5-star review, drop us a comment with a topic you'd like to hear us discuss in an upcoming episode, and you can also keep up with us on Instagram and TikTok. Give us a follow there at Something More Human. Thanks so much.
Thank you.